Hello all you beautiful weirdos, how's everyone doing today? When we're out in the wild, us titans like to do big titan stuff. We get up in everyone's face and get a little destructive at times. We throw beer cans at our neighbors and live on a diet of monster drinks, Cheetos, and crayons. I mean, what do you expect? We are titans after all, so that's what this build is focused on. Not the beer and Cheeto part. It's all about scorching enemies, getting in everyone's face, doing the ability thing, and making the boom boom. Not sure why I said boom boom like that. Seriously though, this build is a lot of fun. It flows together perfectly and it brings back Warmind Cells in a very angry way. I get that old school Warmind Solar Titan vibe from this build because it's obnoxious, but I must warn you, this is not for the faint of heart. The only healing we receive is from Well of Life, and it requires us to beat down enemies like they stole our juice box. We have to get in their personal space and it can be risky. So, without wasting any time, let's get into it. The first thing we need to talk about is the subclass because it ties everything together. For the abilities and aspects, we're using Hammer Strike, the Incendiary Grenade, Consecration, and Roaring Flames. And there's a reason for this, which I will explain in one moment. It'll make more sense after we talk about the fragments. Ember of Eruption and Char are the first two fragments we need to focus on. These cause our ignitions to have a bigger blast radius and spread scorch to nearby targets affected by the ignition. This is important because it ties directly into Consecration and the Hammer Strike. Any kill we get with the second wave of Consecration or the Hammer Strike automatically causes an ignition, which in return spreads scorch to nearby enemies, if there's any left. The reason we want so much scorch is due to our next fragment relying on it, Ember of Searing. This one gives us melee energy back when we scorch targets. The amount depends on what type of enemy it is and how many we scorch, but it ranges from 15 to 30% per enemy. This is why we sometimes get a full melee back when we hit multiple enemies at once and they all start burning. So between these three fragments and Consecration or Hammer Strike, we're already in a loop of fast charging melees because of ignitions and scorch, as long as we hit multiple enemies at once. But we're not done yet. We can create even more ignitions and scorch by using the aspect Roaring Flames to bump our grenade melee damage up after getting solar ability kills. This gives us more ability damage to make sure we get a melee kill to cause an ignition. And the Incendiary Grenade we spoke of earlier has the highest scorch output of any grenade. More melee damage means more boom boom, and more scorch means more melees. It's such a beautiful sight when this subclass starts flowing together because we end up in this groove of melees and grenades and explosions, and I don't know why I'm rocking my head back and forth. We have one fragment slot left. I saved it for Ember of Torches to give us a 25% damage buff to all weapons after a melee attack. I chose this one because we're already meleeing everything in our path, but it also ties into what we're going to talk about next. We can take this build so much further with the help of one exotic and one or two weapon perks. The exotic I'm referring to is Hallowfire Heart. It gives us a 75% bump in base grenade and melee energy and a 350% increase when our super is full. Keep that in mind. You might be asking why I didn't choose the Inmost Light. It is the easier choice, but the problem with this one is we do too much ability damage sometimes, especially while Roaring Flames is active. We end up killing most adds before we even get the second wave of Consecration off, and that does nothing for us because we want the ignition to happen so we can get our melee back faster from the fragments. But that's not the only reason. I mentioned one or two weapon perks as well. Let me introduce you to the origin trait called 2XS. This perk can be found on any of the opulence weapons from this season, and it is powerful. Upon weapon kill, while having a full super, this trait bumps our discipline and strength up by 20 for 12 seconds. This goes perfectly with the Hallowfire Heart because that requires us to have a full super as well. It's no joke, and when paired with another perk called Incandescent, which applies scorch to enemies after we kill something, we can get 10-second melees with a full super, tier 4 strength, and the Searing Fragment. And you know I'm gonna say it again. We're not done yet. We haven't even covered the boom boom yet. I wanted this build to feel like the glory days of Warmind Cells. I know we'll never get that back, but having them drop everywhere just from ignition explosions and our melee is such a good feeling. To keep that Titan Warmind spirit alive, I went with the old tried and true trifecta. Global Reach, Wrath of Rasputin, and Rage of Warmind. These three mods do one thing and they do it well. Create Warmind Cells from killing adds with Warmind Cells and ignitions. Rage just adds a solar splash damage effect to the Warmind Cells we destroy. Global Reach extends the effectiveness of Warmind Cells, and Wrath of Rasputin is the golden ticket of this trifecta. it has a chance to create Warmind Cells from solar splash damage or AoE damage, and this includes the explosion from ignitions. The mods work on a counter system, kind of like Scorch and Ignition. When the counter reaches 100, it creates a Warmind Cell. I did notice something odd with Wrath of Rasputin though, and I don't know if this was intended or not because it does state solar AoE damage as well. But sometimes, Scorch creates a Warmind Cell on its own. I'll watch an enemy burn out from Scorch and it'll poop out a Warmind Cell. More than likely it was intended, but I thought it was worth mentioning. The last two major mods we need to cover are Well of Life and Melee Wellmaker. These two are only here to give us a little healing since we're gonna be up in everyone's face. I tried this build with Explosive Wellmaker, but I found it more reliable when using Melee Wellmaker instead. Mainly because we're meleeing everything anyways, but it also helps because it drops a solar elemental well right on us when killing ads with consecration. Sometimes Explosive Wellmaker would drop the well like 10 meters away or where the explosion happened, and it gets us in trouble. Some good minor mods to pair with this are Hands-On on the helmet and Bomber on the class item for bonus super energy from melee kills and grenade energy after using our barricade. Hands-On will help us get our super that much faster to reap the benefits of Hallowfire Heart and the 2XS weapon perk. And speaking of that, most of the weapons that can roll with 2XS are in the energy slot. This opens up some interesting weapon combinations or gives us a lot of freedom. Most of the gameplay footage you've seen in the background is without a 7th Seraph or Icalos weapon equipped. That was just pure melee. But if you really wanted to step up the Warmind game, some great weapons to pair with this build are the 7th Seraph Saw in the heavy slot and the Wither Horde in the kinetic. If we shoot the Wither Horde and swap to the Saw, it can create Warmind Cells when it kills ads. Plus the Saw chews through everything now after the 40% damage buff it received. I don't want to list off every weapon combo because the video is rather long already, but we definitely have a lot of options, and most of the Icalos or 7th Seraph weapons can be picked up from Banshee or World Drops. One last note before we part ways today, I recommend the Hammer Strike because nothing feels more tight to me than flying through the air and putting your knee through someone's chest, but if you wanted to swap it out for the Bonk Hammer to get some extra healing, the build will still work great, but keep in mind the focus is consecration. The build has been an absolute blast to use, and I'm not even joking with that or trying to hype it up. I like it so much that I made a whole set of armor and created a loadout just so I have it on rotation all the time. There will be a dim link in the description. Let me know what weapons you paired with it. As always, be true to yourself, be good to one another, and have a fantastic day. Thank you! Take smoke, I'ma poke a hole through you, choking's overdue. Come at me and you won't get any older, dude. Crack your holder too. Heating up inside of me, blood so violently. Thanks for trying me. Now it's finally time to see how this rivalry becomes a dynasty.